Welcome to the By Design radio program. My name is Dr. James Proodian of Proodian Healthcare and ProodianHealthcare.com, where health literacy is the key to longevity. And as long as God has us on this side of eternity, my show is designed to help educate you and your families to feel better, function better, and live as many quality, disease-free years as possible. I hope everyone had a blessed week, and thanks for tuning in, listening to me for my continued conversation with you guys on pain. And I decided to start the conversation on pain. It's been 5 weeks now. We are actually entering now show number 6, and I'm going to continue the conversation until I feel as though I've said enough. So bear with me. I don't know how many shows on pain I'm going to do. Today we're going to be introducing autoimmune disease as a source of pain as we come off of a few weeks on silent inflammation, as I outlined Barry Sears' work from The Zone, and also a book called Toxic Fat, which you could pick up. That's written by Barry Sears. And last week's show, we really focused on the neuroanatomy, but basically your brain, and how our brains are highly susceptible to silent inflammation. And recent research is showing us that Alzheimer's and dementia is climbing up the ranks in leading causes of death for Americans. Alzheimer's is now in the top 5 leading causes of death for us. And there's a reason why for that. And as much as medically, there are some new medications out on the market to treat the symptoms of Alzheimer's, we want to prevent our bodies from developing chronic illness, and that's the purpose of the show. So if we're really going to take a solid introspective look on ourselves, which is our responsibility, and we're accountable for our own health. This week was my 5-year-old, my youngest son. His name is Luke. He turned 5 years old this week, and I have 5 children. He's my little guy, and it kind of made me realize too, as your children get older, what seems to be the tone of your prayer? And for my own children, I know that their salvation and their walk with God, their relationship with God, is my primary prayer, and that's typically second. Then typically my second set of prayers is about their health, their welfare, and their well-being. As a parent, you can't help but you want to protect them. And it's interesting. As I was preparing for today's show and celebrated his birthday, I think that a lot of us go through our lives really with this sort of look at health as I'll wait until something happens. And hopefully my show has been shedding light for you guys that we don't want to necessarily wait for symptoms, particularly in the world of pain. So if we could prevent pain, even though that we know pain is going to be part of our human existence, if we could prevent it and prevent the things in our bodies from kind of going haywire to cause pain, then I think we'll all be better for it. So Luke 1:37, for with God nothing is impossible. Let's use that as the backdrop as we learn about autoimmune disease and understand that with Luke 1:37, nothing is impossible, that the conditions, the symptoms, and the light switch that is called epigenetics that we could turn on and develop an autoimmune disease. Let's work at not just, first of all, not allowing that light switch to turn on. And then number 2, if we do develop symptoms and signs of an autoimmune disease, what do we do about it? So you guys know me by now. I am certainly not going to stick Band-Aids on this stuff. We're first going to become very educated on the subject matter. So we need to first figure out and learn. Health literacy is the key to longevity. Let's learn about what an autoimmune disease is and who has a higher susceptibility rate of developing them. So I went to a website, womenshealth.gov, which is the United States Department of Health and Human Services. I really don't rely upon the government for much of my information, but I did like the fact that they had this 13-page document, or actually 12-page document on autoimmune. It's just a fact sheet, and I'm going to be taking some of my material over the next 2 weeks as I cover autoimmune out of this article. And I'm going to show you something about how medicine in general does a phenomenal job of identifying, discussing, and educating, which I'm going to do about what autoimmune disease is. But then I want you to keep a very keen eye on their solution for it. So in other words, when you go to a doctor, you're going to a doctor for two reasons. Number one, that doctor's job is to answer, what is wrong with me? That means give me a diagnosis. Any doctor that you see, remember, you ask them, what is my diagnosis, doctor? Because that's their job. Now, secondary to the diagnosis is what is your recommendation, Mr. or Mrs. Doctor, to help me? Meaning, what's the treatment protocol? So you're there for a diagnosis and you're there for a treatment protocol. So when we look at this article, the diagnosis, or how to render a diagnosis, and the first 11 pages of this document is dead on about what autoimmune is, how to diagnose this, but then they get to the last page on the treatment. And that's where I'll come in and kind of guide you. So let's talk about autoimmune disease. As you know, your body has something called an immune system, which is a very complex network of specialized cells and organs. Then these guys defend your body from germs and other foreign invaders. Without an immune system, we wouldn't be here. There would not be human life without an immune system. At the core of the immune system is the ability that your body has to determine whether it's looking at itself or something that's not itself. Basically, what is you and what is foreign to you. Now, a flaw in the system can make your body unable to tell the difference between you and foreign matter. And when this happens, the body makes these things called autoantibodies, and they attack the normal cells. So here you are, you don't know this is happening. Your body's autoimmune network turns on itself, and the autoantibodies start to attack your normal cells. Now, at the same time, you have these other types of cells called regulatory T cells, and these guys fail to do their job, and they're supposed to keep up in running the immune system. So the immune system is really now under attack, and the result is really a misguided attack on your body. Your body is attacking itself. This causes damage known as autoimmune disease, and the type of autoimmune disease, there's about 80 known types of autoimmune diseases. Some of them are more known, like rheumatoid arthritis, and some of them are much less known, maybe some you've never heard of before. So the body parts that are attacked during this process will depend upon the type of autoimmune disease that you have. So here, that's the backdrop. Your body's turning on itself. Depending upon the type of autoimmune disease, that will then determine what part of your body is under attack. So for instance, things like your brain, your eyes, right? Your spleen, your liver, your joints, your bladder. These are all body parts depending upon the type of autoimmune disease that could be under attack. So overall, autoimmune disease is very common. This is affecting 23 million or more Americans. That's a lot of people. They're a leading cause of death and disability, and some of them, like I said, are very rare, while others are, more known. Like I said, like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or psoriasis. These are more well-known autoimmune disease conditions, and I'm going to rattle off a few later because maybe you've heard of some of them. Maybe some of the people listening to me today have an autoimmune disease. So now let's get into who is maybe more likely. Who's more likely to be under or can be under attack of their immune system? Well, we know that stress is a major precursor to developing autoimmune disease. So women of childbearing age, if you're in the age group and you're a female of childbearing age, your susceptibility to an autoimmune disease is far greater than a man in that same age group. Okay, we'll put them in category 1. Category 2 is people with a family history. So if autoimmune disease runs in your family, like lupus or multiple sclerosis, these are common autoimmune diseases. This could be something that you want to keep an eye on, particularly if it's in the family. So there is a genetic trigger. There can be a genetic trigger to this. Category 3, people who are around certain things in the environment. So environmental causes in the environment, a toxic environment, for instance, with chemicals and solvents and viral and bacterial infections, these are also linked to triggering off this autoimmune response. The fourth category are people of certain races and or ethnic backgrounds. So there is a correlation between autoimmune prevalence and a race or ethnic background. So for instance, Caucasian white people have a higher incidence of type 1 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes is a type of diabetes that you're born with. That is an autoimmune disease. Yet African American people have more incidence of lupus, and as Hispanics do as well. So there is also a race and ethnic vulnerability. So these four categories: childbearing age in women, family history is 2, people who are around things in the environment, and the fourth is race and ethnic background. So when we talk about why these four groups of people may be triggering off an autoimmune response, we do have to take a look at the genetics or the epigenetics. And you've heard me speak about the epigenetic, which is like a light switch, and we have control over our lifestyle and environment because we can control whether or not that epigenetic light switch goes on or goes off. So a lot of the autoimmune diseases are basically become symptomatic. A person realizes they have one because they're in a stressful environment. They allow their lifestyle through poor nutritional habits, a lot of psychological stress, poor physical habits, to allow their body to be weakened, to be immunosuppressed, and that could trigger off the autoimmune response. So let's continue. What are some of the signs and symptoms? Let's say you're some of the signs and symptoms of autoimmune. As much as there's 80 known autoimmunes, they carry with them some hallmark similar symptoms that's unique. And these could be things such as fatigue, dizziness, and low-grade fever. So those three things are generally seen in all autoimmune conditions. In certain autoimmune diseases, symptoms can come and go. They become worse or they go into remission. Sudden flare-ups and severe onsets are very, very common. So these types of symptoms come and go, but generally some hallmark signs are fatigue, dizziness, and a low-grade fever. So why don't I do this now? Let's just sort of rattle off. I'm not going to name all 80, but let's rattle off some of the more common autoimmune. Maybe you didn't realize some of these are autoimmune diseases. Celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, Graves' disease, Guillain-Barré syndrome, Hashimoto's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, inflammatory myopathies. Now, let me just stop there for a second. Remember, all of these autoimmune processes are inflammatory. So you need to connect dots with me. Remember, I don't speak single dimensionally. I am under the assumption that my audience has come on this 76 week ride with me. And now in your health journal, you understand what silent inflammation is. And if you look at autoimmune, this is a hyperinflammatory process. So if we learned about eating an anti-inflammatory diet, we certainly would not want to be eating an inflammatory diet while we have an inflammatory condition. All right, let's continue. Multiple sclerosis, myasthenia gravis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, lupus, vitiligo. These are just some, I might maybe named about 12 or so of the 80 of the more commonly known autoimmune diseases. Just on a side note, chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia have similar symptoms to autoimmune, but they are not autoimmune diseases. Okay, so chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. Yes, many times people are tired, like we talked about, fatigue, pain, low-grade fever, but these are not autoimmune. Okay, so now here we are, and we are thinking to ourselves, well, maybe I have one of these conditions. One of the most important things that I teach my patients is, remember, when you go to a doctor, prepare. You wouldn't go to an architect or a life insurance agent or maybe a financial planner without a plan. When you walk into your doctor's office, have a plan, meaning have write down your family history, write down symptoms that you might have, and you want to share these with your doctor. You want to be prepared. It helps a doctor out so much, not by you bringing in reams and reams of stuff that you copied off the internet, but that you actually wrote down your family history, that you wrote down in bullet points. Just a side note, doctors love bullet points. So the bullet points of symptoms that you might have, okay? And from there, your doctor may refer you to a specialist, particularly if we're considering autoimmune. And many times it takes 2 or 3 different opinions to get the diagnosis really nailed down. So I'm going to end this conversation stopping at this place where we're off to our doctors, we have our health journal, we have our symptoms, we're about to go maybe for blood reports, maybe CAT scan, MRI, because we need to figure out what type of autoimmune pain we're getting. And then from there, put together we're going to pick up next show on what do we do then. Well, thank you for listening to me, Dr. James Proodian. This is the By Design radio program. And joining me this week, I'm on every Saturday. I want to thank Tandem Radio and The Bridge FM for giving me this opportunity. If you want more information about me, please go to ProodianHealthcare.com, Proodian, and you could submit any questions you might have for the show. Please become a blog member at drproodian.com. I blog every Wednesday. That's my way of continuing the conversation with you in a written blog. And I pray you all have a blessed week and a wonderful weekend. Enjoy it with your families. Bye-bye.